it's so hard to do handoff that they can't even automate it in any way. Even though that tool holds all the micro decisions, they're not manifest well. And the CSS that it creates is still really bad. So Figma is still bad at CSS too. That's good. We still have our job,
we
David.
should get Figma on the podcast.
Visit bad at CSS.
David, I'm bad at something. I know is that surprising to you yet? I'm bad.
Actually, it is. It is surprising, but go on.
All right, I'm bad at puns because we're going to be talking about handoffs today, and I'm like, why doesn't anyone talk about how morbid that sounds?
Handoffs?
You know, handoff. Why would you take your hand off and give it to someone else? I have no idea.
I feel like an idiot because I totally did not pick up on that pun. I had like such a football mind in my head, so I was like, "You just hand the ball off," and so I didn't get it, and I was just a hand off.
I mean, and hand the ball off, hand the ball off. Who made this term, and did they really think deeply about what it sounds like and what it means? I feel like the answer is no.
No.
Anyway,
that was elite dad level pun. I just want to say, so please, but go on.
All right, I'm bad at handoffs. We're all bad at handoffs. I'm bad at handoffs in multiple directions. Sometimes giving me their hand, and sometimes I'm giving someone else my hand, right? That's what handoffs are. That's where you're just like, right? You're just anyway, but I was at the Figma Config conference, huge, 2023. It's like as big as a Comic-Con. I'm talking like seas of humans. We could have crowd surfed on the top of these people. It was out of control. And so there's a bunch of handoff tools in there. They're talking about the developer designer handoff, which I'm just going to keep thinking about a hand, just like a 70s movie, just like popping right off. I'm like, here you go, take my hand.
I can't do that. I feel like I need like some magician tricks. It's like, the finger trick where it's like you do. I can't.
Oh yeah, the waiter does that. And he's like, "Oh my thumb is gone. Oh look, I did
yes,
it. Yeah,
there's the one. That's
my kids know that one. I'm the dork that does that thumb trick. Yep.
Well,
but yeah, I want to talk about some of the handoff tools that they gave us. You just talk about how handoff is hard in general, and yeah, all the ways that it can go wrong. So that's the topic of today, David.
I just, for the audience to know, I specifically requested this topic because I knew Adam was there. I saw a lot of Adam had a really great tweet about some of the stuff during that time period. We'll have to find that and put that in all the notes. But what I really liked about this is that for a fair good of time in a year that was in the past that I can't remember because time is a concept only. I basically I worked on the Firebase blog, and so we had this old Firebase blog that I also created. We built a new blog for Firebase on Astro, almost like right as Astro was announced, because I was like, I like this. This is good. Not even announced yet. Fred Schott showed me like an early preview, and I was like, I'm going to build something with this. And he was like, well, hold on now. And I was like, no, we'll be fine.
Hold my beer. Here I go.
It was fine. I'm still very happy with the decision. Very happy with the decision. And so one of the things that I really wanted to do is I've spent the last couple of years trying to learn how to be a better designer, because I find that CSS is that nice like nexus, fulcrum, whatever connecting point, whatever beautiful word I don't know that I should be using.
It was rad. No, it was
rad.
Okay. Like, what a cool use of nexus right now.
Damn. Yeah, is that right? I can only think of the phone. It's, I don't know. But
satellite is nexus too, but anyway. Okay. My dog's name is Nexus.
Is your dog's really named Nexus?
Yeah, well, I have Nexus and Saoirse. Yeah.
Okay. All right. There we go. So you have Adam's dog. No, but you have CSS and then you have design. And then CSS is really the language that kind of gets design going, at least in the web development world. And that was a big reason why I wanted to learn web design and CSS all at the same time, because I felt like I was painting with the same brush. That's beautiful. Not exactly true.
It's really, I'm using my fingers when I'm writing code. I'm like, bleh, bleh, bleh. Yeah. In my mind, this was a paintbrush.
Yes, not exactly the case. But one of the things that we did is I teamed up with just this amazing designer on the Firebase team, Shamak Aparkowski. Just awesome guy, dream designer to have. And we built the Firebase blog. And we had a very classic, I wish we could just back to back, like, I'm the designer and like and I'm the developer. I hope people are watching this on YouTube for this trick. And we just like went at it, and it was awesome project. But one of the things that I realized that I'm bad at was handoff, because he would create these really amazing designs, and I'd look at him and I'd even see some of the CSS in Figma, and I'd be like, okay, all right, I've been studying this topic. Okay, watch a pro do this. And I would implement it, and then I'd look at it, and I would feel like I was playing one of those bar games that was like, what's missing in the two pictures? And it's so subtle and you couldn't figure it out. And you're like, I got 4 out of the 5, but what's the 5? And I could never quite figure out what was wrong. And it was always little things, like things that I learned was, or things I even learned beforehand, but I saw in action for the first time, is if you do all caps in, like, let's say a label or any font for that matter, you really need to do the smallest bit of letter spacing to give those letters room to breathe. And so the eye kind of catches it. And that's stuff that I didn't always notice. Or line height. Line height is so friggin' hard to get right in between Figma and the CSS world. And all these things. So he'd have this beautiful design post. I could see all the like into the paragraphs and the spacing and everything is great. And then I do it and it's kind of like, and he'd always be like, so that's not quite right. And he'd always give me this like really detailed fix and be like, this needs to be like this, and this needs to be like this.
I love those detailed fixes. That stuff is liquid gold. Like, pour it all
really
over me.
Is.
It's so good.
And that's the things I realized. Like, I really thought I was a person who was primed for this kind of activity.
Gold poured all over me, by the way. I don't know if that's just I'm just gonna let that skate through.
Okay, moving on. But like, I thought I was the most prime candidate to. And I'm not going to move on from that, am I? I thought I was the most prime candidate to do this type of handoff task, because I was like, I know design world, I know CSS, I'm going to do great at this, and I did not. You know, every time I thought I would smash it out of the park, and I was just lucky to get on base, and that to me was really difficult. So, I mean, I've had that kind of happen on my own designs. So my own designs never been that complicated, so I can always kind of get it going. But with really complex designs, I find that the amount of subtlety is so hard to be captured in that handoff process. And so, yeah, I mean, I imagine you've had several instances like this in your own designer, developer world, life, career thing.
Absolutely, you know it. And this was like one of my favorite things that I did for years. Like when I was in college, I was a front-end engineer at design school, implementing other people's designs, and all I got were handoffs. Constantly getting Photoshop files, handoffs, right? And I had to make it come true. And you're right, the subtleties between what I was building and what they showed me was always. And back then, it was even more starkly obvious what the web couldn't do and what a design tool could do. And yeah, they weren't, even if they redlined, they're not really writing down all those little micro decisions, because as a designer, the subtleties and the micro decisions make a huge difference. You're talking about letter spacing on an all caps headline. Absolutely. And yeah, one of my favorite moments that I started to do after about a year or two, and noticing that what I built looked like Frankenstein and what they built looked like a shiny, glossy, gorgeous piece of, design, was I would sit down with them and be like, let's sit down. I will be your hands. You be the eyes. I'll be the hands. I just imagined a really creepy video where like hands like slide in on a keyboard, right? And someone else is on the mouse. That's the way we work. That's how handoff.
It's like a CSI thing where they're all like, oh no, we need to hack the mainframe. And you got like 8 hands on a keyboard. And the guy's like, I know what I'll do. I'll unplug the computer. That's how we work.
What I did is I started, because I think designers like to do that too. Designers feel like specialists or specialists. They feel in control. They feel like they're being asked for their expertise. So you sit down with the designer and say, here, I built it. I built the thing. It's responsive. Check it out. And they'll be like, oh, nudge this. Oh, nudge that. And I did that for years, and I acquired all those little details over and over and over again. They're like subtle things, but the thing is one or two of the decisions might feel really dumb at first. You're like, that was really tiny. But then at the end, after all these things have come together, The lots of little things add up to big things, and it makes a humongous difference. It's like and then that's also what led me to making Visbug, is how many times I sat down with designers and the stuff that they wanted to change was always the same. And so I made them a tool that let them do it so that they didn't need me. It was like, here, I'll just like take myself out of it. Let me mimic what your tools do and let you do that on the page that we actually work on together. Yeah, dude, handoffs are mad critical. Red lines can't do it. Green lines can't do it. There's a lot of decision making that's gone in there that's undocumented, and it's on you to take your hand off and, figure it out.
This reminds me of, I used to work on the Firestore console, like big database viewer editor thing. And when I was also very fortunate to have another very, very talented designer, Allie Johnson. She she designed the Firebase Paperflame like logo, and she also she designed a lot of the corgis that are like used in a lot of Google stuff, and she also designed Sparky, he's right there. Where is it? Right there.
Oh, hey, what's up, Sparky?
So she's a powerhouse, and but about once a week or so, after I get a fair amount of work done, she would sit down with me at my desk and point out all this like stuff that I did wrong, like on spacing, like that needs to be, and it was always nudges. It was like you're saying, it's always the same stuff. It was always like, and every week she'd sit down again. You could tell she'd be like, okay, all right, and
here's
like,
how many ways you were bad, David. Yep.
It's what it felt like, and not in a way where I was like mad at her. I was mad at myself because I was like, we're not making these mistakes this week. And then we'd sit down and she'd be like, let's see how we did this week. And I'm like, I did good. And she's like, I'm like, oh, and it's because as developers, we have so many, and same with designers, we have so many decisions to make. And that communication between the two is just so incredibly hard, no matter how hard you try. Like, it's like in basketball, you can try to play as great as defense as you possibly can, but if it's just like that shot can just go in, and there's just nothing you can do. Like, sometimes it's just too hard, and you think you got everything covered and you did everything right, and it still doesn't quite click. And so this is why I'm incredibly excited to hear about all these new tools that Figma has given us in DevMode, because I've pretty much primarily used Figma in everything. I use Figma for making little Twitter cards or X cards, whatever we're calling that now.
Oh, yeah.
Or Zards, shards. I don't know. Okay.
Zeets.
And I use it for even just simple concepts, or just even if someone's like, I don't really know what you mean by that, I'd be like, I'll just open up in Figma. So Figma has become like an everyday tool for me. And when I saw this, I was kind of like, this. At first, I thought it was a gimmick, not like a gimmick, but like a fun new idea. That's like sounds too negative, but like a gimmick. I thought it was like a new feature that was probably going to get better in the future. And then as I saw it, I was like, oh, this is already that better in the future. This is really advanced. And so, like any other good developer, I decided I am not going to learn that right now. I'm going to do that later, and I'm going to ask a friend to do that. So speaking of which, Adam, what is DevMode, and how do I mode on the dev?
Ring, ring, ring. Phone and a friend. His name's Adam. Well, there's a funny good news. So yeah, they went all out. Figma went all out. This is not a tiny new feature. This is like a completely richly integrated developer experience, because they recognized, I think one of the stats is like 30% of the people that open Figma are developers. And they're like, well, I guess we should really lean in. Plus, they've seen other companies in the past go in and out, like Zeppelin and all these things that are all about the handoff, right? But the funny thing is, Figma is still bad at CSS handoff. It's so through DevMode. DevMode is very good. It gives all. We'll go over it here in a second. But I just like the irony is that even after all, it's so hard to do handoff that they can't even automate it in any way. Even though that tool holds all the micro decisions, they're not manifest well, and the CSS that it creates is still really bad. So Figma is still bad at CSS too. That's good. We still have our job.
We should get Figma on the podcast.
We could. It'd be really awkward, to give Figma a voice, but I don't know.
So
okay. So want some juicy, some meat and potatoes? What they ship to help handoff?
You know what? I think that a real foundation of nutrition is vegetables, and in more vegetables. So please give me the vegetables, Adam.
Yes, we're not on the paleo diet, are we? We need to.
I
We're on a Whole30. Give me the Whole30 version.
I don't know diets. So I'm like, yes,
Oh,
the one with the
I sound
fruits.
like I do. I've never been on one, but I hear about them a lot. Okay, so to help handoffs and make handoffs easier for front end between designer and developer, Figma comes out with DevMode. There's an icon in the top right of your your kind of editor now. And when you spin it up and when you go into DevMode, you can choose what platform you work for, right? So you're handing off to a certain platform. It allows you to be specific about that: iOS, Android, web. And then it has a more button. And I think the more is kind of alluding to like React or something more, Flutter, for example, so some sort of framework specific subset of one of those platforms. You can also choose your units. You can choose REMs in Figma now.
I saw that. That was cool. I like that because I like not having to, do math every time I see pixels.
Yes, that's frustrating. And it's nice that they can state, this is one rem wide, which is kind of nice to say, or like one rem
Yeah.
of padding or something like that. It does also ask you to provide a unit scale, which is kind of interesting because the rem, right, is based off of a root number. So apparently
Right.
designers could go make an entire design using rem and then
Please
bump
don't do
up
that.
the base unit scale and then watch it change or something. I'm not really sure.
I don't know. I'm sure there's a good reason for doing that, but that kind of scares me.
Yes, and that's one of the things I was really tentative of. I was like, what does this mean? And how does it actually manifest? And so I built some designs with it and then checked my dev mode output. And I was getting things like half a rem or one rem, which is nice. But I mean, there's also a certain point at which if you're using variables, you have size 1, size 2, size 3. It's very similar to talking about whole numbers and not having to think about whatever. So I don't know. I'm somewhere on the fence with the REM stuff. It's just nice to see them thinking about it and just being considerate of a unit for a platform. Because like one of
Yes.
the things that Figma has always had is they're like, we're agnostic to a platform. We can be, you can design here for Android, iOS, web, whatever, XR, VR, we don't care. And so it's interesting to see them making some platform decisions here, like the unit scale.
If I
You
switch
can
to
also,
something like Swift, do I get like actual Swift UI? And the same thing with like Android, I get like Jetpack Compose and stuff like that.
yeah,
That's dope. Like I like that.
it's pretty sweet. They're helping that handoff. You get to choose a theme of your dev mode. You can bring in some of your favorite tools. So there's like Storybook and things like that. Then there's, can you hear the someone sawing outside my window right now?
Like very we'll just say that's a sound effect that we included in the podcast for learning purposes.
Yeah, we're
We've done
grinding
studies.
thoughts.
They're theta waves and they're good for you. Yeah.
Okay, good. He's stopped for a second. There's also a VS Code plugin. So they're
Oh
really
yes.
positioning Figma as the heart and soul and center of your design. Whereas, like before, you might be saying that your heart and soul was your storybook or your heart and
Right.
soul was something else. They're really putting a lot of things down in the ground and saying, we want to be this single source. Everything should be a child of us. Things should trickle down to these other services, and we are the source of truth. They're trying to be the source of truth. And that's why they made this VS Code plugin. They have this dev mode. They're like, stop leaving us. Spend more time in this tool and be more integrated with your designers. And then they've got other tools to help that out.
So if they're being the source of truth, because Framer kind of had an idea for this for a while, I don't think they fully went all the way in on it. But one of the things that was very interesting to me. And so it seems like, let me if I get this right here, because I actually don't feel like I have this right. I design a button in Figma, and it can become a button on one of many platforms. And that is something that Figma generates the code for. And then using a VS Code plugin, I see that code inside my project. I see there's like a GitHub sync and everything that it's built in. So if I'm following that philosophy thinking about it as like a JavaScript developer, I'm very much having to follow like the presentation and container component style, where like I just have a nice styled button, but it doesn't do anything. I need to like create like a button container or something like that to process any actual logic on it. Like, how do I go from like, I have a button to like, I have a button that does something that like processes
Yes.
a click?
Okay. A button is a good one. So yeah, it's got states, active, hover, all
Yes.
these different things. And so Figma now has variables, and they're not just tokens. They're variables that can be typed. They can be a Boolean. They can be an integer, stuff like that. They have flow control. So in the prototyping modes, you can basically visually code and say what happens in all these things.
Yeah, I've done that
When
before, like rudimentarily in Figma before, but it's
they've
interesting. So
gone
it seems like
hardcore mode.
it's like a first class feature now.
Yeah, and it's basics, but it's beyond the basics. They've done a good stance on it. It looks nice. It's well designed. We'll see if designers pick it up, but it is a lot more powerful. And so why this is important though is like these props, these variables that can be toggled and changed based on interaction and based on other values of variables. Like they can make variables based on other variables values and so forth. And so when you go to look at the code, so yeah, you're in VS Code, right? And you click the new Figma icon that's on the left-hand rail, and it pops out all your team's design files. You find the design file you want, you click it. It's already in dev mode in a big tab in VS Code for you. You find the particular component that you want to work on, which is easy to find because the designer marked it as ready for development, and it gets a big badge over it. And that it gets a promoted export experience, a promoted handoff moment. The designer also can say what changed. The dev tool, this tool will tell you what has changed. So since they last marked it ready for dev, it has a change log that tells you what spacings they changed, the font sizes, the letter spacing that got adjusted, sort of things like that. You can also click on any SVG and just copy the SVG right out of that file and take it
Thank
to your code and
God.
hit paste. Yeah,
It
super
takes,
sick.
oh my God, that feature alone, I'm like sold.
That feature load, I agree, dude. It's one of the best ones in there.
The amount of times, because the designer I work with, Shamik, he was really good at like little icon, just some SVG, like even if it was like a background pattern or whatever, just dude was great at creating SVGs. So they were everywhere, which I loved. And I love getting SVG as my source. But yes, every time. And also like the way that permissions were done, I would have to copy the design because he had everything locked. So I couldn't mess with it, which is a good idea. And then I would have to then go and export and do all this stuff and then drag them and so
Yeah,
and that's how I sounded as I did it all. Just So
me
I
too.
very exactly. So I love this feature already. I'm already like, okay, I'm sold. Nope. All right, I'm on. All the other stuff, okay, it's there, but that one,
Right?
we're good. We're good.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, so then designers put all these props on there. They've got all this state that now the button is able to represent. It's an interactive button. They made a prototype. Now, when you go look at the handoff code that Figma is generating for you, and you choose something like React or whatever framework you want to, it's going to clearly tell you the props that this component needs to take and their types because the designer already did it. And so you get to just go use those and maybe migrate them as you will. I doubt people are just going to straight take it, but it provides a really good hint though, right? It's a good handoff hint, kind of like the CSS that Figma outputs. It's not great, but it is a hint. It's like, it gets you kind of there, we kicked your can down but you got to walk. I guess I'm the can and they kicked me. Anyway, whatever.
Is it good at layouts? Because before you'd always get some
No.
they're doing the best. No, okay, yeah, because you always get some
No.
like absolute positioning. It's just doing its best.
Dude, there's so much garbage in it. It's like if you just do a basic, let's say you have a layout with two cards that are next to each other and you use their auto layout, for example, which is going to make you a flexbox container. You're going to look at the code that it outputs and there's going to be about 4 extra properties that you don't need. There's going to be some flex basis. There's going to be flex shrink 0 and all this weird like defensive CSS that you're like, I don't need. This is making a simple layout look really complicated in this handoff because this tool is not very good at CSS. I don't know, but it does what it can.
I like that point you made. I think sometimes you can copy CSS and then you're just like, and you kind of know in your head that like 2 of those properties are probably unneeded or they're like extra declarative. And sometimes that's good to be extra declarative. Like I'm not going to say don't do that, but I like the concept of, especially as a CSS developer, like showing people like you don't need that. Like, look, we had 4 properties on this rule. That's it. And I think that is like something really good to strive for the sake of CSS, so people can stop saying it's so complicated or whatever. Because we're like, look, 4 properties, and
Yeah,
we're
they're
done.
misrepresenting it. It's the same thing that AI does right now. You ask AI to give you some, you're like, hey, AI, make me a really beautiful card component. Surely you can go steal enough CSS across the internet to make me a beautiful card, and it will give you styles, and it will not be beautiful, and it will be terrible, like the 6-year-old floated CSS. And you're like, dude, you
Oh
real
no,
AI, you suck at this. You're not just bad at CSS AI. You need to go home and stop.
I can't remember the
Go
last
quit
time I
your day
floated
job.
something. Float is no.
I
I
mean,
just
I
can't.
float on my one wheel, but I'm not floating my layouts, you know?
No, no. Why float when you can flex?
Figma also has a box model in there. You can go like click your button and see the
Oh,
box model. They have concepts of padding and stuff now, which is
I like
interesting,
that.
right? Where you didn't really have that before. Now it is awkward though, because it's not real padding. They measure it based off where you put the thing in the middle of something else. So it's like,
Okay, so it can be a little. I mean, it's nice that they're thinking about it, because there's a lot of times where I'm thinking about it when I'm looking inside Figma, and I'm like, okay, so it'll be that and that, or sometimes you lose the concept of the box model at all when you're inside Figma, because you're not really sure as you've sized something. Like you can look at a button, for instance, and then as you start to like hand it off and type it up, you're like, wait, do I want padding on this, or do I want an actual height? Because should it
yeah,
always be?
it's a dilemma. Button's got
No.
that dilemma for sure. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And so many things like that. Like, like, I mean, cards the card you might want only a specific width for a card, because then it stops looking like a card and looks more like a hamburger if it just keeps growing. So like, but then again, oh God, we have another episode here. I'm like, do I want it? Do I want that? Do I want the container though? The layout container to decide its width? Do I want, oh no, should it have a container query? Oh no, David, stop it. Stop it right now. Like I'm starting, these are the things that
Wait, I'm
where I
like,
really feel
David,
bad
keep
at
going.
it.
Keep talking dirty to me. Like, why are you stopping? Yeah, add a container query. Hey, add some has. Ooh,
Oh,
David.
has is good.
Quantity query, that one.
I
AMR CSS right now.
I love has, because one of the things that with has that is just, there's just one use case for has that I have. Actually, I've used a couple, but the one that just maybe be like chef's kiss is when in Markdown, let's say you want to add an image, and when it gets converted, a lot of times, if not most of the time, or every time that I've been dealing with it, uh, it gets wrapped in a p tag. And there are many times where I don't want that image to follow the same rules as an element inside of a p tag.
Yeah, 100. I definitely feel this. Yep.
Yes. And it's the only element inside of that p tag. And so now it's bound by the same. So I have all that in the Firebase block in a grid rule, where it's like, hey, you're in this column if you're a p tag, because if you're a p tag, you're content. But in this case it's not, and I want it to break out to be like more of a full bleed, or just shift a little bit, a little more visually
Yeah.
interesting. And
Classic.
so p has image breaks out of the container, and I saw that and I was like weeping tears of joy, because I wouldn't have been able to do it otherwise. I just had a fixed image inside that
Whoa,
little
yeah.
column.
P has image display contents.
Yeah. Ooh, yeah. Display content. We need to do a whole episode on display contents, because I didn't tell you this, but I ran into another beautiful use case of display contents. And I don't
Really?
know. Yes. I don't know if I want to spoil it. Yeah, I'm not going to spoil it.
Don't spoil it. I think you know
No.
display contents better than me now. I'm like, I know what it does. It seems like a mystery disguising, thing. But I'm like, if you found cool use cases, yeah, share them over. You were doing it mostly for Subgrid before, right?
Yeah, I was doing it for Subgrid originally, but I found one that's completely unrelated to Subgrid. Well, not unrelated, because you could be in a Subgrid, but for the most part, conceptually, I saw it and I was like, oh. And when I tell you, you're probably gonna be like, oh, I've done that before, but you're gonna be like, but it's a good one.
Sick.
And
You're
this is,
cliffhanging like the next episode here. You're just
I
like,
was,
oh, be ready for the next one. There are some more Figma things if I will want to go through them, but yeah, let me know.
I was going to say, this is the part of the podcast where we just completely rant on CSS and do not talk about our topic chosen at all. But yes, let's get through those so we can. I feel like that'll be like a nice wrap up.
Cool. Yeah. Recap with your teaser for the display contents where I'm bad at it and you're good at it. I'm down.
No, I'm definitely still bad at it.
Okay, one really quick thing, just because we blew over it like it's normal. Oh, you just click on the Figma icon in the sidebar, and it's just easy and simple. And look how it's probably, dude, that's crazy amazing. They're literally loading the entirety of Figma. I'm trying not to cuss because it's so cool. They're loading Figma in your VS Code editor, and it just
It
is
is
like,
cool.
yeah, it's just a tab. It's just a tab of stuff. And you're like, that's not just a tab. That's an entire app that people pay hundreds of dollars for, loading now inside of a tab inside of my code editor. The world is out of control. It's a pretty amazing feat that they accomplished there. It's just got to
I
give them a
agree.
holler out for that.
And one less
All
thing
right,
to
so
manage.
yeah. Oh, I thought you were kind of glitching out there for a second. Are you back?
Oh
What
yeah,
was
no,
your?
we're good. We're good. Yeah, no, that's always my biggest thing. My biggest fear in these podcasts is there's going to be latency, and then you're going to be making really good points, and I'm going to be like, I like turtles.
David, that was like 20 seconds ago, you weirdo. Yeah, they got built-in diffing, so it'll tell you what changed. You can see marks that their things are being changed. There's a slider when you get it, so it's almost like you can, go to the left, you see what it was before. Go to the right, you see what it is after. So they have a
That is awesome.
diff slider with the change list, which is super cool. Yeah, rems worked out pretty good for padding. DevMode sidebar, you can see a simplified view of layers. So when you're in DevMode, you don't see the whole complexity of the layers. You get a simplified version.
Nice.
You get autofocus to the element. So when you're working and trying to extract things, it autofocuses it for you. There's lots of cool stuff inside of there. You can open in VS Code right from Figma. So of course there's a button there, right? You can just be like, you're like, oh crap, I'm in Figma. I want to be in my editor. Boop, just pops it right in there, takes you right to the document. It's pretty sweet. I tested out putting all of open props into Figma variables.
Yes.
Because Figma variables are very different. So you can't just, they just aren't the same as anything we've had before. So the tooling needs to update. There's not a lot of auto import stuff, although there probably is now. It's been a couple of weeks and people were really excited about that. Yeah, the diff overlay is cool. Seeing all the variables. I mean, that's mostly it. We talked about rems and the handoff stuff. There were some really cool, there's a plugin architecture as well. So that as a team member, and we're all working now inside of Figma is the source of truth. I can write a plugin that takes the work from designers and ports it into our components. So whatever architecture we have, whatever unique React thing we're doing, whatever thing we're doing with Lit or some other component framework, we can port these things over. So it will give us an abstract representation of that component. We can iterate over it and pop out the code all within VS Code with Figma running it. So it's like I wrote code that taught Figma a trick, that taught my VS Code a trick, and now I'm like easing this handoff all amongst ourselves inside of this tool. So that's a
We
pretty
live
good
in the
wrap up, I
future.
think.
Yeah, we live in the future, man. I just say, like, if I had to rank the features in my very brief understanding of it, number one, SVG export.
Copy
Boom.
is SVG. I mean, no, I
Copy
mean
is SVG.
it puts it in your clipboard. Yeah, that's
Yep.
good stuff.
Number one by light years. Sorry, it's just such a great convenience. Number
So good.
two, so good. Number two, I would have to say that diffing, because I can't tell you the amount of times I've had the designer be like, "And you see what's different, right?" And I'm like, mm-hmm, "Yeah," because
Yeah, I do.
before it had the thing, and now it doesn't. And
This isn't my lying falsetto. This is how I always talk.
so I like to be like, yeah, okay, I see. And also, or a lot of times the designer has to make 2 copies of every time they do something or copy it over. And then sometimes I can get confused about which is the current. So I like that. And then 3, I just have to say, yeah, probably having Figma inside VS Code is really nice because it's just one less thing to jumble through. And that's like, you're jumbling through and you see Twitter, X, whatever, and then you're like, and I'm distracted. All right. Oh, what was I doing? Oh yeah, that's right. So staying focused. I like that. I like getting everything streamlined. So those are David's top 3.
Very nice. And yes, we're bad at handoffs. So is Figma. And that makes me feel less bad about it. It's hard for everyone. So feel good about that for yourself, listener, that handoffing is hard.
Well, thank you all for joining us on this one. Stay tuned. Actually, I don't know what order we're going to do these in, but at some point, you may have listened to it or you may be listening to it next. We have a very special guest coming on and I'm very excited about it. So be either happy that you heard it already or get excited because you're going to hear it soon. See
Take
ya.
care, y'all. We'll see ya.